Rime is a real-time messaging SDK that allows you to easily integrate the PubNub REST API into your application. The goal behind Rime is to provide state functionality for PubNub within Flutter applications. This package will allow developers to spend more time focusing on design rather than requirements when managing chat within their applications. Real-time SDKs provide developers a way to incorporate instantaneous data transfer in their applications. This may involve the sending and retrieving of data between many different clients, and could even involve sending many different types of data depending on how the developer sees fit. A common way that real-time systems manage data transfer is through channels. A user can join a channel defined by an ID in order to connect to another client. This channel will then allow the client to send messages, retrieve messages, and if storage is involved, load historical messages. Channels are often ordered chronologically based off the last time the channel was updated in order for users to find them. And additional features could be built on top, such as notifications, presence, signals, authentication, and admin functionality. PubNub is an example of a real-time data transfer service. PubNub allows for reliable, available, transactional, and integrated real-time data transfer. It works off of a channel-based architecture and provides many different SDKs for many different programming languages, including Flutter and Dart, as well as a REST API for incorporating more complicated features that developers may want. Flutter is a development framework that comes with many benefits. It has a massive open source community that makes it easy for developers to share and release packages for other developers to use. Developers constantly release SDKs and different UI widgets that other developers are then easily able to incorporate into their applications using a site called PubDev. These packages allow developers to reduce their development time significantly and include more functionality, animation, or UI elements on top of drastically reducing the amount of redundant and boilerplate code inside of the development community. Another important part of many modern applications is a global state manager. As apps get more and more complex, the importance of global state managers increases significantly. Global state managers allow you to control the flow of data through your application and update the UI accordingly. This provides developers with an organized flow of events that are uncoupled from the application or the UI, allowing it to be updated and maintained easily.
Rime is an open source SDK made with Flutter that implements PubNub's REST API. Our group realized that PubNub's Dart SDK for Flutter does not provide enough state functionality to manage entire full-stack chat applications. This made us move over to PubNub's REST API to allow us to provide developers with our own SDK and solution. Rime provides developers with a global state manager, which is mainly focused on the organization of channels and how they reorder or change based on a client's action. There are many basic use cases that a developer has to consider when coding a real-time application. Rime allows the developer to overlook these use cases with supported functionality within its state managers. To help developers understand Rime, they can go to PubDev or the Rime repository on GitHub, where they will find a README along with an entire documentation. Rime is an entirely serverless system. This means that developers can quickly import it into their project and get started with working on a real-time application. It sits between PubNub and your application, acting as a middleman to keep things simple. Rime enforces storage and formatting rules on a PubNub instance and deals with the flow of events directly to the front end. Rime is entirely plug-and-play. Developers can integrate Rime into a new or existing application to enable real-time features. However, this does have its downside. Rime expects developers to have authentication systems to verify users so that they can be logged into the system. When diving deeper to understand the flow of events within Rime, 3 components stand out and control the main functionality within the service. The Rime block is the central state manager for Rime, and it is used by you to directly control your application in response to state changes. The Rime repository, however, is the core component within Rime. It holds the PubNub client and is the primary interface between the application and the PubNub instance. Upon initialization with an authenticated user ID, the Rime repository opens up a set of subscriptions to receive messages from PubNub relative to the user's memberships. Furthermore, different components within the application can bind to the Rime repository to listen to all subscription events received on a user's subscriptions. Finally, the Rime API opens a set of functions to safely interface with the PubNub instance by applying Rime formatting rules onto the data being sent. These three functionalities work together to provide the developer with a set of state functions to allow an authenticated user to have their channels and messages managed on the front end. A general flow of events has the developer initializing the Rime block, which entails the initialization of the Rime repository and the PubNub instance. This then binds onto the Rime repository to create a subscription that allows for the management of channels. The Rime block then receives events directly from the application, making those events into Rime API requests, sending them over to the PubNub client, and pushing them out safely. The responses for these events are now listened to within the Rime block and sent back to your application to respond with UI. This makes Rime a three-tiered system. Developers will often interact with the Rime block, which interacts with the Rime API, which interacts with the Rime repository. Events and data propagate forwards and backwards through this tiered system. While this is the general usage of Rime, the developer can ignore the Rime block and directly interface with the Rime repository and the Rime API as well for providing native functionality. Rime provides developers with extensible usability within their application. The Rime SDK does not put any constraints on how a developer's application looks. It only manages the data flow to the PubNub instance. This relieves the developer from having any extra boilerplate for their applications. Furthermore, Rime provides reliable data transfer and assurance of no data loss for highly available and reliable applications. Developing the application, our team identified 4 constraints that are going to be maintained upon deploying the application. These constraints were successfully met on our first release. First, we implemented tests to ensure that Rime was completely compatible with PubNub and Flutter. This also ensured us that the PubNub instance was being used for all data import and export needs. To go with the open source movement of Flutter and Dart, we included the MIT license to open source the software for free publish and use. After all testing and licensing requirements were met, we deployed the package to PubDev, allowing developers to use the Dart package manager to import and use Rime within their application. The Rime package is supported by the Dart package manager and is posted on PubDev. The package page shows developers all they need to know when getting started with Rime. As of Rime version 0.1.0, the package currently supports all platforms supported by Flutter, including web, iOS, and Android. It is important that developers understand that Rime is a plug-and-play system that does not provide any user authentication. The installation section shows developers how they can use the Dart package manager to import Rime as a dependency into a current project. All of Rime's functionality can be imported by importing one file, the rime.dart file. From here, the developer can use any functions associated and exposed by the Rime SDK. Before using Rime, developers must ensure that the Dart version on their project is greater than Dart 2.7. The setup section includes crucial steps for the developer to follow when setting up Rime. These steps have to be followed correctly to ensure that the Rime instance is set up for use. In this step, the developer must provision a PubNub instance for themselves and pass it off to Rime so that it can be used in the state manager. Next, the PubDev documentation shows developers how to use the system and how it's structured, aiding them with code snippets along the way. This section contains important references for the developer to use when learning relevant information about the package, including PubNub, which is used for real-time messaging, along with block, which is used for state management and the creation of the Rime block. The remainder of the section provides developers with documentation that accustoms them to using the state managers provided within Rime, along with the lifecycle of the state managers. This includes the initialization of those and the interface between the components. The remainder of the page on PubDev displays documentation on how various classes and their properties and what they mean. This will be the single point of reference for Rime developers to use when going to make a real-time system with Rime. Any additional information the developer will need is available on the API reference accessible through PubDev. This reference displays all the functionality that is available to developers of Rime using the SDK.
Rime provides a real-time system for Flutter, which is a cross-platform framework and incorporates PubNub for real-time messaging. Rime will first be initialized on launch of your application. The initialization includes subscribing and listening to all the channels that the corresponding user ID has active. This will provide the user with real-time message callbacks of all the clients they have previously chatted with. The initialization function will proceed to call the getChannel event, grabbing all the channels that the client is currently subscribed to. The chats on the screen currently represent those channels. Rime allows developers to incorporate creating a channel. This is done through a list of UUIDs. Once a client retrieves the UUIDs of the people they want to start a channel with, then Rime provides a create channel event and will add the channel to the state as well as organizing it chronologically. The channels are pulled in through PubNub in chronological order based on which channel was last updated, or in other words, the last channel a message was sent through last. Through Rime, developers are able to open channels and send whatever type of data they want. This entails videos, images, GIFs, text, links, etc. This is done through the payload in the send message event. This data can only be seen by the users that are authenticated through the channel. If a user was to leave the channel, they would no longer be able to see any of the messages that are currently being sent. Rime also provides the functionality to delete a channel. However, this event will only delete for the client on one side of the channel, meaning the other clients within the channel will still have a history of all the messages sent in the past. Developers can also incorporate a client leaving a channel through Rime, which means the client will no longer be subscribed to the chat receiving the real-time messages. The developer can then decide whether the client is allowed to see the historical messages or not based on the architecture of their application.